Is World War III just around the corner? How could it start? What are the most likely scenarios? With today's technology, advanced nuclear bombs, AI-powered warfare, space-based satellites, and robotic soldiers, what kind of war would this be? And after the war, what will the world look like? Where would be safe to escape to? Maybe that's why Trump has ordered the US to build its own Iron Dome defense system. These are the questions we'll dive into in this video. If you love exploring big ideas with a unique animated style, subscribe to Link to Think. Global tensions are rising every day. The US and China are clashing over Taiwan. Russia is still locked in war with Ukraine. And for the first time ever, Iran and Israel have attacked each other directly. But that's not the whole story. The US is expanding its control over key strategic areas: Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, and maybe even Mexico, each playing a crucial role in maintaining American dominance. Europe is at its weakest military state in over a century. While China and Russia rapidly build up their forces, the UK and the European Union are falling far behind. Many are asking, could these conflicts spiral into a global war? If World War III begins, the world will never be the same again. Let's dive into the possible scenarios that could lead us to catastrophe. One of the most likely scenarios for the start of World War III is the rising tension between the US and China over Taiwan. Taiwan may be a small island, but in global politics, it's a ticking time bomb. China insists that Taiwan is part of its territory, and that, sooner or later, it must return to the motherland. Meanwhile, the US has pledged to defend Taiwan at all costs. But why is Taiwan so important? 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors are made in Taiwan. If China takes control, it could dominate the global chip market, a nightmare for the US and its allies. Its strategic location allows the US to maintain a strong military presence in Asia, with multiple bases right on China's doorstep. If China takes Taiwan, it won't stop there. It could expand its influence across the entire Pacific region. And now, this standoff has turned into a major flashpoint. What makes this war more dangerous than past conflicts? AI-powered drones and autonomous warfare, both the US and China are using unmanned systems for combat. Hypersonic missiles. China has weapons that can bypass America's missile defense systems. Space warfare. Both nations could target each other's satellites, crippling communications and GPS networks. If war breaks out, other global powers won't stay on the sidelines. Japan and Australia will likely back the US. Russia could use the chaos to push deeper into Europe. India and Southeast Asian nations will be caught in a difficult dilemma. And here's the big question. Do you think the US would actually go to war over Taiwan? Or are we heading for another Cold War instead? The war in Ukraine has been raging for 3 years. Peace talks have failed, war expenses are skyrocketing, and both sides are stuck in a stalemate. Now, a terrifying question is looming. Could this conflict escalate into World War III? Russia claims that NATO has expanded too close to its borders, threatening its national security. On the other hand, NATO insists that its goal is to defend its members and maintain peace. What is NATO? NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is a military alliance of 32 countries, including the US, Canada, and most of Europe. Its core principle? An attack on one is an attack on all. If a NATO country is attacked, all members are obligated to defend it. But right now, 3 scenarios could push this conflict out of control. First, Russia attacks a NATO member. 3 years of war means exhaustion, financial strain, and a higher chance of miscalculations. Both sides have suffered heavy losses, but no real progress has been made. One small mistake, one wrong move, could drag NATO and Russia into a direct war. If Russia accidentally strikes Poland or the Baltic states, NATO is forced to respond under Article 5, and that means full-scale war. Second, NATO strikes Russia first. A NATO preemptive strike is unlikely, but not impossible. If Russia escalates its attacks on Ukraine and NATO feels Kyiv is on the verge of collapse, it might intervene. That would mean a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. Third, internal collapse in Russia. Sanctions, internal unrest, or even a power shift in the Kremlin could put extreme pressure on Russia. The Kremlin, by the way, is Russia's center of political power, just like the White House in the US. If Russian leadership starts losing control, it might intensify the war to hold on to power instead of backing down. Now, Trump is pushing to lower oil prices to cut Russia's war funding. But here's the risk. If Russia's economy collapses, the Kremlin might feel it has nothing left to lose and respond aggressively. Will economic pressure end the war, or will it make Russia even more dangerous? Could this war go nuclear? Some analysts believe that if Russia faces defeat, it could resort to using tactical nuclear weapons because that's its last trump card. But there's one big problem. If Russia launches a nuke first, the US will retaliate, and that would mean the end. If this war escalates into a global conflict, Europe becomes the main battlefield. The global economy collapses. Energy prices skyrocket. China, seeing the US distracted, might seize the chance to take Taiwan. Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia could also get dragged into the chaos. And now, the big question: would Russia actually dare to attack NATO? Or is this just another Cold War that could drag on for years? And more importantly, if this war turns global, which country would suffer the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. After decades of tension, the Middle East conflict has entered a new phase. Saudi Arabia and the UAE recently improved their relations with Iran. But at the same time, they've also been strengthening ties with Israel. And that has made Iran very uneasy. For over 40 years, Iran and Israel have been bitter enemies. They've always threatened each other. But for the first time, those threats have become real. Israel launched direct strikes on Iran's defense facilities. Iran retaliated with drones and long-range missiles. This is a major shift, because until now, both sides have fought each other indirectly through proxy forces. But this isn't just a problem between Iran and Israel. How could this conflict spiral into a global war? Iran's trump card, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran holds a powerful weapon without even firing a shot. It has threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz if tensions escalate. And that would trigger a global energy crisis. 33% of the world's oil would be blocked from reaching Europe and the US. That would send oil prices through the roof, shaking the entire world economy. If that happens, two things are almost certain. First, the US might intervene militarily. Second, Saudi Arabia could take a major hit. If Saudi oil can't be exported, it loses billions. and that might push Saudi Arabia closer to Israel, shifting the balance of power in the region. Meanwhile, the US is Israel's closest ally and has repeatedly warned that it won't let Iran become a threat to Tel Aviv. If this conflict escalates, the US could get directly involved, and that could pull other world powers into the fight. Could this war go nuclear? Right now, the chances of a nuclear war are low, because Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. But there's a wild card: Russia and China. They might not jump in just to defend Iran, but this war could be a golden opportunity for them. Russia could use the chaos to ramp up its attacks on Ukraine. China might see this as the perfect moment to make a move on Taiwan. And just like that, war spreads like dominoes, turning a regional conflict into a full-blown global war. Now, the big question: do you think the Iran-Israel conflict will spiral into an all-out war? Or will it stay limited to smaller strikes? If World War III happens, it will look nothing like the wars of the past, because today, new technologies are taking over the battlefield. On the ground, in the skies, deep in the oceans, and even in space. And these game-changing weapons will redefine how wars are fought. Let's take a look at 4 of the most powerful military technologies that could dominate World War III. First, drones, the unmanned soldiers of future wars. In World War II, bombers and fighter jets ruled the skies. But today, drones have become the real game changers. They're cheaper and easier to mass-produce than manned aircraft. No pilots equals no human casualties for the attacker. They can loiter over targets for hours and strike without being detected. This makes launching attacks on enemy nations easier than ever. Second, AI in warfare. When machines make the decisions. For centuries, wars have been controlled by humans, but now artificial intelligence is taking over decision-making on the battlefield. AI-powered autonomous weapons can detect and destroy targets without human involvement. Advanced data analysis gives AI an edge over even the smartest military commanders. In cyber warfare, AI can shut down enemy networks and even hijack their drones. Why is this so dangerous? Wars could become fully automated, spinning out of human control. AI doesn't distinguish between civilians and military targets. Hacked AI weapons could turn against their own creators. In a World War III scenario, AI might be the one making the battlefield decisions, not humans. Third, hypersonic missiles. Faster than sound. Impossible to stop. In World War II, ballistic missiles like Germany's V-2 were terrifying weapons. But now, hypersonic missiles are changing everything. They travel at 5 times the speed of sound, over 6,200 kilometers per hour. Current missile defense systems can't intercept them because they're too fast and unpredictable. They can carry both conventional and nuclear warheads. In a World War III scenario, there would be no time to react, because these missiles are simply too fast for any defense system. Fourth, war in space. When satellites become targets. In past wars, battles were fought on land, at sea, and in the air. But now, space itself is becoming a battlefield. Satellites control everything: military communications, GPS, and missile guidance systems. If a country destroys enemy satellites, it can blind its opponents and cripple their military operations. China and Russia are developing anti-satellite weapons ASAT that could take out US and European satellites. The first strike in World War III might not even happen on Earth. It could start in space. Destroying satellites would leave a country defenseless, losing both intelligence and navigation. For the first time in history, direct warfare between nations could happen in Earth's orbit, just like in sci-fi movies. World War III would be nothing like previous wars. It would be faster, deadlier, and fought in ways we've never seen before. What do you think? Which of these weapons is the most terrifying? Has technology made war more dangerous or more controlled? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If World War III turns into a full-scale nuclear war, nobody wins. The entire planet would turn into an unlivable wasteland. If you want to see how that nightmare plays out, check out our nuclear war video. But if nukes aren't fully unleashed, or if only a few are used, then some countries will suffer more than others, while a few might actually come out ahead. So let's break it down, from biggest losers to potential winners. First, Europe, the biggest loser. If NATO and Russia go head-to-head, Eastern Europe, Poland, Germany, the Baltics, and Ukraine will be ground zero. Missile strikes and cyber attacks will wipe out major cities. Europe's dependence on Russian gas and oil will trigger an energy crisis like never before. The economy crashes, and rebuilding could take decades. So, Europe takes the hardest hit. No way around it. Second, the Middle East, total chaos. Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia won't stay on the sidelines this time. Massive airstrikes and missile attacks will wreck critical infrastructure. Israel could target Iran's nuclear facilities directly. Iran's proxy forces might spiral out of control, throwing the entire region into deeper chaos. If Iran feels it has nothing left to lose, it might go after Saudi Arabia and the UAE directly. Saudi Arabia and the UAE could lose their current security as war shifts the power balance in the region. So, the Middle East won't just watch this war, it'll be in the middle of it. And the chaos won't stop even after the war ends. Third, the U.S. walking a tightrope. If the U.S. joins the war, it'll be fighting on multiple fronts. Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and even space. Cyber attacks and domestic terrorism could cause chaos at home. Unlike past wars, this time major cities like New York and Washington could be direct targets. The U.S. has over 800 military bases worldwide, making it hard to stay out of any global conflict. If it gets dragged into a multi-front war, its chances of coming out on top drop massively. Trump has repeatedly threatened to pull out of NATO. Is the U.S. trying to reduce its military commitments before things spiral out of control? So, if the U.S. joins the war, it might never recover. But if it stays out, it could still hold on to its power. Fourth, China, superpower or super collapse. If China invades Taiwan, the U.S. and its allies will respond, and China could end up like post-World War II Germany. Ports and trade hubs will be key targets, since China's economy depends on exports. War could drag Japan, Australia, and South and North Korea into the fight, escalating the conflict. But China has one huge advantage. Unlike the U.S., it isn't locked into any military alliances. It can choose to stay neutral. So, if China avoids war, it could be the biggest winner, because after the war, destroyed nations will need cheap goods to rebuild. But if the war drags on, even a neutral China will feel the economic shockwaves from global trade collapse. If China stays out of the war, it could dominate the post-war economy. But if it joins, it's game over. Fifth, Africa and South America. The unexpected safe zones? If World War III stays non-nuclear, these regions, far from the main battlefields, won't see direct fighting, but will still suffer economic fallout. If it turns into full nuclear war, then nowhere is safe. Even these regions will collapse from food shortages and climate disasters. But if it's a limited nuclear war, one that only wipes out major industrial nations, Africa and South America could become the new economic hubs. Countries like South Africa and parts of South America could boom as they absorb waves of refugees and become new global players. One thing's clear: ultimately, today's global powers benefit more from peace than war. And that's perhaps the best news of all. What do you think? If World War III starts, which country will you be in? And don't forget, leave a comment, share this video, and help spread awareness. Maybe, just maybe, this knowledge could help prevent a catastrophe.